Welcome everyone to the session on managing large projects. I will be sharing my screen with the slides so that you can follow along with those. But before we begin, I just wanted to thank you for taking time on Saturday today. It's, exciting time, tumultuous time for all of us. And I appreciate that you are committed to learning what you can do to manage your own path through this project that you have signed up for and maybe wondering why. But managing a large project such as the dissertation or a master's degree thesis and getting to that end goal is laudatory, and so I applaud you for being on that path. So I'm going to share my slides and my screen. It's a bit tricky sometimes on doing this, so hopefully you are seeing my slides. And my name is Wrye Sententia. I am a professor, technically what's called a lecturer. So if you're in on what those subtleties are, thank you very much. I am a lecturer with the university writing program. And oops, I jumped into my background. I'll start with this and go back. So I have been teaching writing at UC Davis for over 15 years now. I completed my Ph.D. in September of 2004. I remember it well. And I just wanted to give you, a sense of understanding that I understand it was trial by fire for me to complete my own doctoral thesis. And since that time, as a result of my own struggles, I really went into teaching writing with deep empathy and a wish to address some of the misconceptions that people who are trying to write come with. And so over the past 15 years, I've been driven by questions, like, why do so many students struggle with their writing? Why do so many capable and smart, intelligent people kind of bow out or find themselves incapable of finishing? Why do people fixate on things like take out the fluff, be clear and concise? Those are cliches that I hear again and again in how people approach the craft of writing. Why do people think that writing is only creative, that they're not creative people so they can't write? Those are, again, other misconceptions. There's a lot of mental baggage around writing. Why do people at cocktail parties apologize to me about their grammar? I don't know. So those are some of the mysteries and guiding questions which have helped me to create and refine practices and principles to support writers in whatever they are handling, and in particular, writers who are working on major projects, whether that be a grant proposal, which is kind of a major project in a lot of fields, or if it's a dissertation, a master's degree thesis, academic articles, and also creative books. So I work with writers of all sorts, and that's what I do for part of my time, which is this Razor writing coaching. And so that's really where I have distilled a lot of my knowledge and my expertise to make it practical and implementable for writers. So I jumped to my about. I should have said welcome. Some of the logistics, this session is being recorded just so that you know. And then also I would really appreciate it if you could gather either a pen and some scratch paper to write on, or have an open document for this session in which I will have you do some small and easy writing exercises to ground what I'm saying with some of the things that you can implement. Okay, so, and then lastly, or second to lastly, if you have questions, please do add those to the chat, and I will review the chat at the end of the presentation to make sure that I address any questions that come up for you, but feel free to add them when they come up for you so that I can kind of see a path of where your questions fit into what I was talking about. So alternatively, you know, you are welcome to unmute yourself if you need assistance. And then lastly, if you do have to leave early before I finish, please go ahead and complete, let's see, Teresa, are you still there, or do I have Olga to help me? If Teresa, if you can add the GradPathways survey, as you know, this dissertation day is provided by GradPathways. So if that can get added to the chat, that would be wonderful, just so that people have the link for completing their survey at the end of this presentation, because GradPathways has offered these dissertation days for many years now, and they're, I find, increasingly refined and more practical and actionable for you in your path. So giving feedback is one way to help me to help you. It also assists GradPathways in helping future graduate students. Okay, so so those are some of the logistics. And now I would like to ask you a few questions. And so one of the first questions I have for you is, you know, do you see your project, your writing project, as something that is easily laid out for you by your department or by your advisors? Do you see it as something that's a straightforward task, or do you see it as something that is complicated? So just thinking about that and kind of, you know, recognizing whether you think, okay, I think this is manageable, or, you know, I'm not sure where I need to go, what I need to do. And so, you know, I will say that if that applies to you, you are in the right place. And now on scratch paper, I'd like to ask you to reflect for just a few minutes on what the biggest project that you have ever undertaken was. Okay, and it may be your dissertation or your master's degree thesis, that's fine, but I'd really like you to think about something else. Think about a prior project that you have completed, and it doesn't need to be a work project. It could be a personal project. For instance, when I was 18, I took on a personal project to go and live in France and you know, enroll myself in courses there, and really took on the project of getting there, paying for it, and all of that. So that's just one life example from my experience. So depending on you know, what your life experiences have been, you may need to think back further than others, but think of something that was a project that you undertook and that was successful. And if it wasn't successful, why not? So think about that project, and I will give you 1 minute to write about that. Okay, and so the next question that I would like you to write about, and you know, I'm going to have you write about it in a slightly different way. The first question, it was just like, answer the question. In this one, drawing from your personal experience, perhaps as an employee or as a member of a club, a team, a church group, a synagogue, a mosque, I don't know whatever organization or affiliation you may have had from some other situation, what do you see as the characteristics of an effective manager? So who was in charge? Who was the leader? How did they, you know, how were they effective? So don't think about the dysfunctional ones. I want you to focus on someone who you admire as a manager. Again, for instance, in my recent life experience, one of the people who I admire most is my daughter's soccer coach, because he has a lot of the traits and characteristics that I believe make someone effective in managing a group, managing the parents of the team, and then orchestrating and managing all of the games, the tournaments, and the logistics, the hotels, all of that stuff. But instead of just writing this out as a paragraph, I'd like you to try listing what those characteristics or traits of an effective manager, thinking of a concrete person, are for you. So I'll give you maybe not a full minute, but we'll see. Okay, I gave you just about 30 seconds to do that quick list. And now a last warm-up question. Thinking about yourself in the various roles that you have as a graduate student, do you consider yourself a manager? This could relate to experience as a TA. It could relate to a role in a lab, and it could just relate to you in your own role with your own project. So think about your role, and if you do consider yourself a manager, why? And if not, why not? So 30 seconds for this one as well. Okay, so 30 seconds may not have been enough for you on that question, or maybe it was. The point of these warm-ups is really to show you how you can use a short question on a focused topic to really get some traction on writing. That was only a minute or 30 seconds for each of those. So in your own practice, in your own doctoral or master's degree work, this is just an aside on managing large projects. It's more about writing, using and leveraging writing. And if you participated in my previous session on overcoming writing blocks, you'll recognize what I'm suggesting, which is a focused free write using a limited amount of time to help leverage some traction on an idea or a topic. Okay, so that's what we were doing. It also sets up, oops, stop, slides, move forward. It also sets up the topic at hand, which is, managing large projects, but typically there is a, kind of a prejudice against bad managers, and thinking about management or project management in industry or in a workplace setting. Being a graduate student is your work. And so, and you probably have some managers who also oversee your work. And I'm not talking about the managers in in sort of a task-driven setting. I'm talking about the managers of your doctoral thesis, thesis, or your master's thesis. So thinking about how they behave with you, it's easy to get critical or blame, but what I'm suggesting in this presentation is that there's a management problem that is bigger than just it's their fault, or I need more time management, or some of those kind of superficial fixes on what time management is. And that's why, I like this slide, because it kind of pokes fun at, oh, well, just listen, share information, teach, adopt a serviceable attitude, and treat people like human beings and do the right things. These are all kind of traits that go with, what a good manager might be, but it's more complex than that. And so, this is kind of the overview of what I will cover. And, I hope that this session will be helpful to you in considering your own management problem. There's 3 parts to it. One is the project management. But involved in project management is self-management. How do you manage your own participation in this task. And that's why I asked, do you consider yourself as a manager? Most graduate students probably do not think of themselves as managers, and certainly not in the sense that you might apply in a workplace setting. So I'm suggesting that that is a place to kind of reset your thinking so that you know how to behave as a manager for yourself. That's why it's helpful to think about who is a good manager, who do you admire, who's really effective at getting things done, to use the Stephen Covey reference, and also who is effective at managing others. So in your role as the principal project manager for your dissertation or master's degree thesis, you want to have skills that will help you to do effective project management, and that's pretty much practical stuff. You also want to have skills that are managing others, and this is a tricky one because when I talk about managing others in a dissertation situation, you're actually talking about managing your managers, your advisors, your dissertation committee, and your director. And I don't mean that you're somehow manipulating them behind the scenes. What I will hopefully provide for you are some usable strategies that can help you to clarify for them what you're doing and why in your project management, so that they can give you the green light, the go ahead, and understand that you're progressing on your path to completion in a non-worrisome way. Okay, so and then that leads back to the self-management. What is most helpful to what are the practical features of kind of helping yourself to succeed? So how do these apply to your advanced degree projects? I've already kind of previewed that, but definitely this last one. Think about how you're managing the communications. Effective project managers are good communicators typically. And so for you in your role, that's going to entail some more thought about how you interact with your thesis committee or dissertation director. I know there are some guidelines online, 7 tips for graduate students. I think I saw on a UC Davis blog, and it mentioned stay in clear communication with your committee. But what is clear communication? What are you communicating? That's the question. So one of the ways of thinking about project management is how complex is the task? And if you are knowledgeable about complexity theory, you probably know more than I, if that's in your field of study. But one of the things that comes up in thinking about complexity is, what are the moving parts? And so this is taken from a recent article in the Harvard Business Review about the complexity of organizations. And it says complexity involves a large number of different elements, such as specific technologies, raw materials, products, people, and organizational units that have many different connections to one another. And in thinking about the connections, that's key. The other aspect is that both these qualities, the different elements and the connections, can be an advantage or a disadvantage depending on how they are managed. The kicker is that the leaders, the people who are in charge, the project managers, lose grasp of how all the elements are intertwined. And so now we are back to how does this apply to your degree program? And it has to do with acknowledging or recognizing those components and deciding, okay, what are the elements? What are the connections that need to be kept kind of front and center? And how can I help my managers, the other leaders, to keep the same targets in view? common elements that can snag a dissertation when we're talking about project management, managing the project of getting to that dissertation phase. Well, these are some of the snags. And now I know many of you are thinking of project management as the whole picture, the data collection, the experiments that you need to run, and all of that. And definitely there's a level of complexity that needs to be thought through and managed. I'm focusing on the writing, on the dissertation or the master's thesis as the focus for these project management principles, so that you can scaffold that for other areas of your project. Because this is a general presentation, there are many different disciplines that you are in and many different requirements for those dissertations. So these are kind of general guidelines of places where I have seen students, graduate students, kind of get snagged in their project management. So one of the places to look is, field work. And so managing the field work in relation to the writing, that's something that can be practically managed, even if it's on hold. And my heart goes out to those of you who are unable to conduct the research that you need because of COVID restrictions. But just know that there are other ways that you can be productively advancing your project, but you have to think about what needs to change. So don't just think, oh, I can't work on it right now, and sort of put it off. But there are strategies that you can use to move to the next section, which is assessing your writing needs. So when you think about the writing of the dissertation and you're kind of pondering, what do I need to do? What are those goals that need to be kind of nailed down? Well, you may not be able to think everything through. And this is one of the aspects to managing complex projects, which you can see in this slide on looking at high-risk projects. And these are like mega projects. This is like building the channel under the tunnel, it's called the channel, but anyway, the tunnel from London to Paris, the underground tunnel. So these are some of the ways that might get approached, but you can see that there's this organizing for the unforeseen, anticipating unknown factors. Now, of course, none of us could have anticipated a pandemic. That is true. So, but in thinking about the writing and anticipating what you're going to need, there are ways of fitting in what you've done to plan what you need to do. Unfortunately, it's not a straightforward thing, and there is no one size fits all, but it is helpful to start to think about what you're writing and how that will fit into the bigger picture. So what I'm suggesting is get to know what are the possible snags in your project, identify them, and then step back and see if you can start to, address some of those practical issues. And you'll notice this last one under assessing the writing needs, it says misunderstanding of how to achieve a book-length manuscript. Have you had any training in how to write a dissertation? Have your advisors or your dissertation director had practical training in how to guide that process? If not, then that is an area of research need. And when I say that, I'm saying research how to achieve a book-length manuscript. I'm a big fan of how-to books for academics because most of us are so in our head, so in our complex and nuanced thinking that it becomes secondary, or it seems like a waste of time to be reading a how-to book. But in point of fact, if you have never managed a large project, then a how-to book on how to manage a large project makes a lot of sense. So just keep that in mind. And then lastly, this assessing the feedback needs. Now we're into that third realm of managing others or managing your committee. Start to assess, do a kind of an inventory or an assessment about your committee. What is their style? What is their management style with you? Are they engaged? Do they tend to say, oh, you got this, come back and see me when you have a chapter? That's what I would call hands off, okay? And that management style may not be the most effective for helping you to develop your ideas. So if that is your advisor or dissertation director style, you want to take that into kind of sober consideration on how can you help them to know what you're working on sooner rather than later in a way that affirms that you're on the right path. So it's kind of like in industry, you would have project managers who are reporting back to their supervisor. What are they reporting back on? Not the minutia, not the nitty gritty, but maintaining regular meetings or opening communication. With COVID-19, I have no idea what that has done to, sort of having regular meetings with your thesis advisor, or I don't know what that looks like. So you know better than I, but what I am saying is don't just let their style dictate your action in the role. Okay, so if they are a micromanager style, meaning they're giving you feedback too early on things that are not developed, and this has to do with the writing process, which I'll get to in a moment. But if they're giving you feedback, for instance, on how to format your citations, and you're still in the drafting phase or the idea gathering phase for your project, that feedback on how to format your specific citations probably isn't timely or needed right now. So there's a misalignment sometimes when the people who you are working with on a project, meaning your dissertation advisor or committee or master's thesis director. So those kinds of roles come with certain expectations, but it's important for you to sift through the feedback that you're getting so that it's actionable for you. I'm also a big fan of restating what comes up in a management meeting. So if you have a meeting, probably in Zoom, with your advisor to discuss a chapter or to discuss a particular methodology, that's great. I would recommend that after that meeting, you write up a brief synopsis of what transpired. And I'm talking about business writing. I'm talking about bullet points. I heard you say this. I heard you tell me to change this. And using a structured, simple, straightforward style to restate what you heard in the meeting. Because by doing that right after the meeting, if they said, fix this, 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 and this in your chapter, by restating it to them and sending it back to them, you have, you're intervening in a possible misunderstanding. Maybe that's not what they meant. You're also intervening and preventing yourself from a waste of time on targets that they thought were secondary or incidental. And it allows them to respond to clarify. Now, if they're hands-off, aloof, well, that's another issue, but most advisors want you to succeed. They want you to advance, but they're busy people. So imagining what it's like for them to receive your message is one way that you can ensure that they will be able to respond. So, and that has to do with something, a strategy for thinking about managing writing projects that I will get to, but just the preview is, it's called PARC analysis. So we will get there, but okay. So I'm going to give you a few minutes, I think 5, to think about what are the elements in your project. what are the practical concerns that you have right now? Are there technology factors that you need to consider how to manage? What will you use to organize your data sets? What methodology will you use to interpret your data sets? Will you need to add tables and charts? Do you know how to add tables and charts to your documents? So some of these are practical issues, and some of them are conceptual. So, so think about what the elements that are concerning you right now might be. Another technology factor might be anticipating at the end of your project, what style format will you need? Now, I am not suggesting that you do your citations manually, and hopefully by now, your field you have a clear sense of what the citation style is and how to use the technology to automate your citation formats. So if you don't know that, then that's a to-do list. So creating a to-do list that's not just a master list of all the things you need to do, but that's specific to where you are in your project now, but also for things that you can anticipate you'll need later. You can start to factor in the time to learn the technology or to learn the citation format. And I'm saying that because you don't want to just focus on the writing if you yourself are responsible for putting in charts and you have no idea how to add charts. So that's maybe a simplistic example, but what I'm trying to draw your attention to is things that you know are going to be an issue, and just getting those written down. Skill factors. This could be something that's as simple as how to start a book-length manuscript, meaning your dissertation. If it's a master's thesis, it may be slightly different. How to improve the clarity of your ideas, how to write to produce more writing, how to revise. So rather than thinking about redoing what you write, it's really about how do you take what you've written and massage that into something that's usable for a chapter, for instance. So those are skills, and they're not beyond you, but they may not be the set of skills that your advisors or dissertation director have themselves. And thankfully, UC Davis has a robust program of writing faculty who are experts in how to write. And so making use of those available resources through the Writing Across the Curriculum, through GradPathways, by looking up the university writing program and seeing what's available to doctoral students or master's degree students as training, as ways to account for the project elements that are coming, but that you may not need yet, but you can factor in time. So a good project manager anticipates what's coming. Okay, so, and then just to touch on the time factors, this relates to team factors I've been talking about, your committee, that's your team. You are your team, and your committee is your team. But in terms of time factors, thinking about what those limits are on you, beginning with the end in mind, again, to refer to that Covey quote that I'm sure you heard if you were at the plenary session. And so thinking about when your project needs to be done, but also something to borrow from industry, when would your project be obsolete? Now, this is a different thing. It's kind of in that more competitive range. And what I mean by that is, are there advances in your field that could make your doctoral thesis obsolete? That's a bad thing. So taking into consideration it's something you need to get done soon, quickly, gives you a different way of managing that project so that you can get your content out there. And so this also has to do with delays due to COVID, time factors that might have been implicated. So just making a list of those is another helpful thing. And then Life factors. What are the practical constraints or limits, the elements of your life that make it important to bracket your time? So this could be children, spouses, a commitment to an organization or a volunteering role. It could be, unforeseen life factors. Sometimes births are unforeseen or unanticipated. Marriages, those can come up. Okay, so a death in the family, an illness. So those are life factors that could happen. Some of them are positive life factors, but they all have a time factor involved. So a good manager takes into consideration those hiccups, and that's how making some effective planning can happen. So I think I've talked through my 5 minutes on this. I think I'm going to keep moving. If this speaks to you as a way to help you to manage your project and start to manage yourself by thinking about what is at issue. Again, using writing and particularly listing under each bullet point would be an effective way to start to get a meta picture on the project that you're working on. Oops, let's see. Okay, breathe. So I, managing a project in the way that I'm talking about it, that you are the manager, you are also the team. And so, it's complex just in the sense that what you are doing has so many different variables, including roles that are outside of your role as a graduate student. So the project that you're facing is complex. It's also changing and evolving over time. So when you think about it, you want to just allow yourself, an oof, and and recognize that you are doing your best. Okay, and if you feel like you're not doing your best, that could be an issue of a perception, a misperception that somehow everybody else has a handle on it. They're managing their own projects or trying to. So I just want to remind you that it's not enough just to say, oh yeah, I'm a project manager, I can manage this. And it's not okay to rely on platitudes like, oh, adjust your priorities, make a plan, use time management, polish up that dissertation, just get it done. Those are the kinds of slogans that a bad project manager might use because they don't resolve the issues at hand. So what's the real solution, Wrye? This is where I have to preface what I'm going to say, again, with caveats on the fact that I don't know your particular project, your particular field. I'm speaking in a screen to, a gallery of faces, and while you all look very nice, we have quite a few participants in this session, so I'm not able to address the individual differences in your specific project management for your project. So I want to make sure that I'm caveating, putting some kind of boundaries on what I'm saying. So I am speaking generally, but what I can address is I can address some of the thinking that goes around this. And what I want you to do is breathe in and embrace simplicity as a way of managing this complex project. So I began with complexity theory and talking about all the different moving parts and the connection between the elements that you can identify, the unforeseen factors, trying to anticipate all of this. Well, that's great, but it's also daunting. Now, there's another way that simplicity can almost be a bad word in academic settings, because you're talking to many people who have devoted their lives to specialization in very refined topics and have nuanced thinking. And you know, my belief is that the blue and red kind of divides around education, but that's a topic for another day. And I mean the blue and red of the you know, the election map. But anyway, so I want to say that simplicity does not mean simplistic. Okay, so when I'm talking about what's the simplest solution to your project, it could be that finding the one question that you are going to address this week for this, not this chapter, but even just this section, that's a way of simplifying your task as a writer, thinker, researcher. So when people say break it down, breaking it down, if you don't have a clear sense of what the final product will look like, so again, borrowing from the language of industry, what's that product going to be? Well, your product, you know, is a dissertation, a defense, a completion of this degree. But there's so much complexity in that topic that it's important to benefit or to leverage some of the best practices in industry that are thinking about extremely complex issues or you know, ways to get products out there. I mean, goodness, we live in an incredibly complex time. So this is something that I want to offer that I have found useful in my own project management, and that I use to guide people in their writing process to complete major writing projects. And so this is borrowing from this book that was distilled by these two academics. One is at the MIT Sloan School of Management, and the other is involved in the Stanford Tech Ventures program. So it's a good read. There's also probably TED Talks by both of these authors. So I invite you to, you know, explore that, but to kind of borrow from the best of what they're saying. They've established the concept of simple rules, which are concrete strategies that focus your attention and simplify the process, the way that we process information, really the way that we think when faced with a problem. So you can think about triage as a good example. When you have an emergency doctor who has to decide and implement triage according to the severity of symptoms or the, you know, just like the likelihood of a loss of life or other factors. They are implementing, and it's called triage from the French word, and it's sorting. It's how do you sort? How do you choose? When that system, that sorting gets overwhelmed, that's another issue. But let's talk about something very soothing and simple. Okay, and so this example is from the book, the Simple Rules book, but it's an example that is from Michael Pollan, who is a well-known writer and has written quite a bit about food and just different aspects of it. But his approach to, well, Michael, what should we do? How should we eat? Can be distilled into these three simple food rules. And so you may look at them and say, ha ha ha, that's not just simple, it's simplistic, but not really. If you think about what is behind these simple rules, and this is where it's essential to see developing simple rules as a process. So eat food. What kind of food? So the behind this simple rule is eat foods that are recognizable foods that came out of the ground, that came from an animal. Okay, so eating foods that your grandmother or your great-grandmother would recognize as, that's food, that's lettuce, that's a carrot, I recognize it, rather than the prepackaged and kind of, glossy, seductive photos of food that get sold in under the guise of food. So that's one way. It's a rule that allows you to discriminate and discern. It makes a decision for you before you even approach it. Not too much. Portion. So it's a boundary on how much you should eat. Not too much. So what's not too much for you might look vastly different from someone who is a professional athlete training for an event or a weightlifter or something. So they're not too much. It's going to look different. So these simple rules are also specific to you, to a person. And so, finding yourself in those simple rules is another way to see whether or not they will be effective. And then mostly plants, well, that speaks for itself. Okay, so that's an example of how you can focus your attention on grocery shopping by having 3 simple rules in the back of your mind. So that's how they can be helpful. Now we're into the self-management portion of this presentation. And I'm going to ask you to think about your own simple rules in a minute, but I also want to explain to you what these different kinds of rules are. And so a boundary rule, like I said, the Michael Pollan's not too much, is a way of setting limits, and it allows you to focus what you're doing and when. And my analogy for a boundary rule in the writing will have to do with applying boundaries to what you're doing at a particular phase in your process of going through a dissertation. Timing rules, well, those are rules, obviously, that can help you to get things started by setting a time limit on when in a day you might sit down to do your project. Okay, so it's establishing rules. You're the project manager. You can establish your own rules, but setting those timing rules. So it could be something that's setting a finite amount of time that you will commit to regularly to work on or towards your dissertation or thesis. It could be another kind of timing rule to prevent things that inhibit your ability to perform well. An insomnia rule, and I wish I could say I abided by this, but I've been doom scrolling for several weeks now, late at night. But if I were to implement a positive rule about insomnia, it would be go to sleep when I'm tired and get up at the same time every day. So that's a simple timing rule that sets boundaries on sleep. It's linked to time. So that's another kind. The last kind of rule, stopping rule, is a way that people who are managing complex projects, simple projects, business projects, projects to launch a product or in industry, they have stopping rules. So I don't know if you're familiar with the term fail fast, but that is a way for business leaders to cut their losses. Fail fast. So why am I introducing this to a discussion on completing your or managing your dissertation or master's thesis? I'm addressing it because stopping is an option. Now, I'm saying it's an option. It should not be an unhealthy option. But when you think about why you are doing something, if you redefine what the intended outcome is supposed to be, it may be healthy for you to stop. Now, again, caveat, I don't go away and say, Wrye told me to stop my dissertation project, or Wrye told me to stop graduate school. That's not what I'm saying, but I am saying that you want to think about where you, with your life, have a set boundary on when to stop. Now, this is again tied to boundaries and timing. So setting a completion date for yourself that's well before the actual due date for your project is a smart way to manage your own project. And if you pass that limit, what are the consequences? What needs to give? Is there a need to readdress, the plan? Is there something else? The other stopping rule that I do want to mention is that some people stop because there are better opportunities elsewhere. There is, and that's a mature reason to stop. But if you're feeling burdened and in an unhealthy place in relation to your project, I just want to remind you that you have the power to stop. Okay, so ironically, I have in my own past, I remember a point where I thought I needed to stop, and rather than just slinking away, I contacted my dissertation director and I said, I think I should stop. And he said, that's because you're almost there. So don't stop because of, a misperception, but do think of what your limits are on, why you might want to rethink what you're doing or how you can productively push the timeline up to make it useful to you in your life. So now we're into the part of my simple rules. So these are my simple rules about writing the dissertation or the master's degree thesis. And I've got 3 of them. And they overlap and sort of interact with each other. The first one is, do not wait to start the writing. You don't need to finish collecting data. The issue is that it's a different kind of writing that you can be doing, but you should be writing throughout. And the best analogy would be, I know that some people use a marathon. If you're not a marathon runner, it may not make sense to you, but the idea of preparing as you're training for the long haul. So this dovetails into the second one, which is manage yourself with metacognitive tools. Metacognition is a way of stepping back and assessing what's going on. It's super effective for complex thinkers such as yourselves, for perfectionists such as yourselves, for the A student driving behaviors that got you to graduate school. Just a suspicion, not sure if that applies to everyone, but by and large, people who are committed to going through this additional rigorous training process at this point in their lives, typically they are very effective at ideas and at data and dive in really deeply, but not as effective at pulling back and applying some of these management principles to themselves. And then the last thing is the writing process. So that's where we're going with this. No matter where you are in your path, in your degree milestones, and this is a picture of a doctoral degree. Obviously, a master's degree is similar, but not as extensive. But I have this image up here because it looks so simple, right? It's like project management. It says, okay, I get admitted, then I just sit there, right? Do nothing. Coursework and degree. Okay, I'm doing coursework, so I don't need to do anything else. I'm just doing coursework. So the fact that it's segmented like that, I think, is an artificial problem. It's a problem with the way that it's conceived of. So if you look at this and instead say, okay, look at that dissertation block. That's a big chunk. So you don't have to wait until you get there, because it makes it look like like it's separate from the thinking that precedes it. So for instance, when you are in your coursework, some of your faculty may have given you the advice, just start taking notes. Take notes on what you're reading, or start keeping track, create a bibliography of what you're reading. And those are great things to do. But the question is, how is that helping you to think about the material that you're encountering? And this is where in the same way that I opened with questions and said, write about this question for this many minutes, use a list in response to this aspect, and keep a list. So those strategies are ways for you to engage with whatever it is that's coming in. If you find something in a course that you're taking particularly useful, I know that it's difficult because you have so many other things going on, but setting aside time, finding the time, setting aside the time to return to that article and go through it and extract the meaningful questions for you, even if it's not connected to a topic yet, if you don't know your topic yet, going through and extracting those questions, just the list of questions, that's writing. So, and then from that, later on, when you revisit your topic as your topic develops, I'm not even saying answer them, I'm just saying extract the questions that you have. And then when you review that list of questions, maybe you're like, okay, those two questions relate to this question that came up in another article or set of data that you were reviewing. So you start to kind of have a meta scale of what the questions are that interest you, that are relevant to your topic. Okay, so I'm speaking in general terms, so I hope that you understand that I'm limited in how I can dive into to assisting you specifically, but we will have time for questions at the end. I promise you that. And then the other thing to know is that each field does have different expectations for what viable questions are. And so checking in with your managers and saying, hey, I read this article, these are the questions I have about it, what do you think? And maybe that's too broad of a question to send to a busy faculty member, but what I'm saying is, if you say, this is where I'm going, and you kind of check in with them and make it easy for them to respond with a, yes, looks great, or no, I think you should also look at, okay? So creating a way to keep the communication open with your other team members, but you're doing the work, you're managing the project, you're managing them by making it easy for them to respond and to give you quick feedback, not feedback on a chapter. Don't say, oh, here, I wrote a chapter over the weekend, could you look at it and give it back to me by Monday night? That's the way to kind of start irritating your faculty advisor. Don't do that. But if you do think, okay, what's at issue here? What do I need to be writing now? And can I get some early feedback on the questions that I'm coming up against? That's probably a smart use of your time, and it makes it a limited amount of time investment for the faculty person to chime in. Okay, so just keep in mind, you can start writing now. So marathon, weightlifting, any major accomplishment that requires endurance training or that requires building up strength, that's the analogy for getting to that place where you've got everything you need to complete the dissertation. So in the same way that bench pressing, to use a weightlifting thing, if you wanted to lift 500 pounds and every day you went over to, and laid under the weights and tried to lift 500 pounds, you'd never get there. Well, maybe one of you, I don't know. But what I'm saying is you have to start small. So when I say don't wait to start the writing, I'm saying start with a stage appropriate kind of writing and also using time limits. I'll give you some guidance on that, but starting with a shorter amount of time. And speaking of small, there's this great resource. It's been created by a Stanford behavioral design. He's in charge of the Stanford behavioral design program, or the lab, and it's called Tiny Habits. This is an active link in the slides, and I will give you a link to the slides in the chat at the end of my presentation. But it's a way of thinking about tiny habits, which are really basically tiny rules. You know, so if you have a goal to eat healthy snacks, then you know you might have this tiny habit that you put in place. Eat a bit of cauliflower during my afternoon break. So that's very small. It's manageable. Tiny habits are a way of scaffolding the behaviors and new habits that you need to alter a behavior that you don't like. So it's behavior modification. It's also tied to a lot of neuroscience. Those of you who are in the field of neuroscience and habit formation, you already know this, but it's about how you link and anchor the habit to a new positive release of dopamine and all of that. So I highly recommend this Tiny Habits. There's also a book by the same name, again, in the vein of self-help books. You can do a 5-day program. It's automated, but you'll see that it gives you what you need to start to think about how you can shift your behaviors and manage yourself to make you a more productive team member, okay? Because remember, you're the manager and you're the person you need to manage. So what are the boundaries, timing, and kind of stopping rules that you can use in your writing? I have a linked handout here. I'm not going to go to it right now because it will disrupt the presentation, but just know that this handout is one of the key handouts that I use in teaching my upper division writing courses, trying to help the next generation of scholars, and also that I use to help professional writers. And the strategies have to do with these metacognitive rules or approaches that you can apply to your writing. Okay, so in order to manage yourself, one of the questions will be, how can you set a goal for yourself? Every project, when it's well managed, has a clearly defined goal. So I would like you to spend a little bit of time writing down about what will be the biggest benefit to you in completing your dissertation or your master's degree thesis. So I'm going to set a timer for, it looks like yeah, okay, let me see. Yeah, we have time. Okay, so I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes, and I would ask that the only constraints on this, the boundaries, the rules that I will put in place for you to do this, is that you write continuously. So do not stop. If you feel like you can answer this in one sentence, well, you probably could, but elaborate on what you write. So if, for instance, you say, the biggest benefit to me will be that I can get a job, okay, in X industry. So that's a one sentence response, but then why do you want that job? Why is that the best fit for you? And I'm not questioning that. I'm saying, write about it. Write about what it means to you to get a job in that field. Why is that such a big benefit to you? Describe it, elaborate. So you'll have 5 minutes. I will set the timer and I will let you know when you have 10 seconds left, so that you can kind of stop. The other aspect to this is, do not correct what you're writing. I'm asking you to ignore your mistakes. It's a focused free write. It's got a boundary on time. You've only got 5 minutes to do it. And if you find that you're struggling to write anything, then Write that sentence. I am struggling to write this. Even if you write that down 1 or 2 times, your brain will kick into high gear and give you something else to write about. Okay, so 5 minutes, go. And that's time. So from that experiment, you may have found that you wrote quite a bit. You may also have found that you didn't write that much and you were surprised that you couldn't just write following those simple rules that I said about how to approach this kind of writing. So that's useful information. So try to refrain from self-blame, self-criticism, or kind of just the mental baggage that could cause you any kind of thought or judgment about how you performed on that task or the quality of what you wrote. Get away from that, because this kind of writing, what I've just introduced to you, is it's just like a fingernail on process, but it's one way that you can manage that kind of self-criticism or judgment, and remember, I'm talking about managing yourself in this long project. So knowing that it's okay to have some writing sessions that are not productive, so throwaways, okay? The more that you can leverage productive writing sessions, the better. This kind of writing, I said it's like a fingernail in the process, is called focused free writing, and it works really well with a specific question about any aspect of your project. So it's great for responding to writing or responding to other reading that you're doing if you're early on. It's also a productive way, once you're drafting, to extend your thinking without the expectation that what you're writing will be of usable quality. It's an idea sifting device, and I have just used it for the joint purpose of helping you to identify what I call the P in my acronym, PARC. Why are you doing something? What gives it meaning? What's the meaning behind whatever the activity is? And this is a way that you can approach your larger life project and your dissertation project. So in this, I'm not going to take the time to lead you through this, but I would encourage you to go back to this slide and answer these questions, devoting between 3, 5, 10 minutes, however much makes sense to you, to writing out your responses. Then another way to manage yourself on what's your goal, what's your life goal in relation to the project that you're doing, is to stick a short version of this on your wall in front of the place that you're working, so that you're managing your mind from getting into an eddy too deep. So if this applies to you, if you know what I'm talking about, you're so passionate about your topic that you dive in too deep and you forget that, okay, what do I need to get done here? That's one strategy that can help you. Okay, so stepping back and using metacognition to guide your choices. Oops, had a timer there. We're going to skip that. Going to the next slide. Your PARC for your dissertation. So PARC, I kind of alluded to. It's an acronym that I made up. It's not anything fancy. It's a distillation of key concepts in writing pedagogy, but I like to use it in a metacognitive way, both for the big picture and then also the specific document. You can even PARC a paragraph, but I don't have time to explain how you might talk about the purpose of a paragraph, the reader of that paragraph, et cetera. But I want you to think concretely about what your purpose is in writing your dissertation. Now, this could be specific to the goal of that topic, like what you're trying to display with that topic. I aim to show blank, or this will provide the impact of blank. Okay, but try to stay somewhat large scale on thinking about what the purpose of the work that you're contributing is, because you can also think how answering that question might be a very likely interview question. Can you please tell us what the importance of your work is in relation to something? Okay, so setting out for yourself some of the defense of your topic by claiming it, that's a good way to get grounding. In terms of readers of your dissertation, this is a way to manage your own concerns, and also to, in a deep way, help you with time management. Who will read it? How will they read it? Why will they read it? If you can distill your audience down to 3 individuals or 4, all of whom are well-intentioned and want you to succeed because you've managed the communication for months, years, in the way that I'm suggesting you can, if you're at that point, then it kind of changes the audience of receptive, helpful advisors from what you may perceive as judgmental, critical, smart judges. Okay, so do a shift in the way that you behave so that you can have them on your side. And I'm not saying kiss up, suck up, be phony. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying think concretely about what your role is and how you want them to feel about your role in that project. If you convey that you are in control, and again, I'm not saying fake it till you make it, that is not what I'm saying. But if you apply some of the strategies that I'm introducing here and pursue, use research to find what you need to know. I'm not talking about academic research. I'm talking about the practical how-to research to fill in the gaps in how you're approaching them, your audience, then that's a good thing. Okay, so in terms of your role, that's your role as the writer or as the project manager in this. And so, if you define yourself as I am an emerging scholar in the field of blank, see how that sits with you differently than I need to know everything there is on this topic, otherwise I will fail. It's a concept shift. It's a shift in how you think about who you are and what you're doing, and makes it much more manageable. It makes it simple because you are not trying to do everything. You're recognizing your role. You're recognizing that you will not have a handle on everything, that you may miss a key methodology. But those are the kinds of things that can be accounted for or addressed as you go. Projects change based on unforeseen factors or elements that come up. All right, I think I'm going to skip context for now, just in the interest of time. I will say that there's links to these key handouts that detail some of this. I also have the Key Campus website, which puts into perspective some of the context or time-bound elements of your project. So you know enough, but you may not know how to write your dissertation. And so this brings us to my third simple rule, which is to apply the process of writing to your project. Where are you in your writing process? And this will be different from where you are in your doctoral path. You can write at any time. It's just a different kind of writing. So in the pre-writing phase, where you're gathering ideas and researching, I've already described how you can play against your own reading and engage with it by creating questions for yourself, or identifying issues that are consistent, so that you start to have a catalog of the material that you'll be grappling with. So that's one example. And then of course there's all these different stages, but I do recommend that you apply a simple rule by knowing where you are in your writing. Are you in a drafting phase? Are you in a revising phase for ideas? Are you in a phase where you should be concerned about the quality of the headings and whether they are parallel in structure, or subheadings? What will those be? Titles of dissertations, how will those terms be searchable in a database or using the internet. So those kinds of concerns each have a time and a reason for being applied. And then lastly, unfortunately, this editing, what's called editing in common parlance, is not what writing instructors think of. Editing is this final phase of formatting, citation formats, pagination, margin length, and all of those final things. And I say unfortunately, because too often people who are in a project together may not understand these concepts in the same way. So because you've had this, you've participated in this session, you can now see that there's a lot more subtlety and complexity in the writing process, but you can break it down by knowing what is an appropriate approach for now, for the segment of your project. And in complex projects, you may have chapters that are in the draft phase, while other chapters are ready for some sort of more finalized form. So it's a moving parts kind of scenario, but by using my simple rules on the writing, you'll be able to see which rule to apply and why. Okay, so the last thing that I will leave you with, and I do want to allow just a few minutes for questions as well as the evaluations. So I was going to run you through this, but I will suffice it to say that the purpose of this is to tell you how you can create your own simple rules. And this is what led me to create the scaffolding and the supports that I have for writers. You can create your own simple rules as well. What will move the needle on your project for the outcome that you seek? Now, you can define that outcome in any way that is helpful to you. I recommend defining weekly outcomes as well as having a sense of the long-term project, which is related to what's the benefit to you. Okay, so using some questions and some inquiry to figure out what is the outcome that you seek. Don't just say dissertation. Well, that that's like saying project. Okay, so think concretely about what the outcome is that you want, and then what's a specific bottleneck. What is something that's preventing you? It could be something that's a skill set issue. I mentioned all those factors. Is it a technology factor? Is it something that's missing in your skill set that you will need for your dissertation? Is it something you can outsource? Not to another country, but for instance, if you are a multilingual learner, you may want to outsource a review of your chapters before you give them to your committee for clarity of language. Okay, and that's not saying that that it's necessarily unclear, but typically, if you have not had enough training or traction on how to write, then even if you're a native writer and speaker, you may have gaps in your knowledge. So I'm just saying, know what you need to know and get the help that supports you. And then lastly, you just write down those rules. So for instance, I have a sample of some simple rules. So if I take what will move the needle, well, I need to be writing more. Okay. What's the bottleneck? I'm depressed, lethargic, feeling stressed out. Okay, so right there you can see there's a disconnect. Okay, so the bottleneck is an emotional or state of being. So in thinking about the simple rules that can help you to move that needle so that you're writing more, it may be something that's not about writing at all. Exercise 30 minutes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and if you have to tie it to something that's productive, then say, after reading X number of articles on this topic. Okay, but committing to the exercise is the key part that will move the needle towards the outcome you seek. It may seem oblique or indirect, but if it gets you there, then that's good self-management.